Hi, welcome back, and here we are back at our scene where we left it the last time. I did that maybe I don't quite like that floor. It's not 3D enough for me, there's not enough depth to the stonework. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn up the normal and see what effect that has. That should make it slightly more three-dimensional, which, yeah, it has. But I think I was maybe a little bit enthusiastic when I turned the specularity down to nothing, or near nothing. I think I need to turn that back up again. And yeah, it's starting to pick up. There's some little glints that show you that it's 3D. Needs to be a bit more than that though, I think. Do another trial render. That's not bad, not bad. Wants to back off a bit from there, I think, because I don't want it shining away out in the background. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Maybe a little bit down from there. And maybe the diffuse intensity up a bit. And yeah, that looks quite a lot more convincing as stonework than it was. Okay. I think that will do us. Now we want to get rid of this horrible grey, and the way we're going to do that is with a texture, and it's going to be an environment map type texture. So we're going to go over to the web and Google images, and we're going to search for a special type of file which is called an HDR or an HDRI file. You can search for either, you'll get the same sort of things. Right, so here we are, and these are the sort of images that you'll find. We want an outdoors one, really. Now there's different HDR type images. The circular ones are designed to map onto the inside of a dome. Some of them look up, some of them look down, some of them, you know. But anyway, we want a flat one which will go really onto a tube or a cube. I happen to know that a tube will probably work best in this application because we're not looking at any point straight up really, but we'll see what they all look like a bit in a minute. Right, so we're set to large because we want large files and have a look around. Okay, do we like that? Not really, because it's a number of reasons. One is there's too many trees, not enough sky. The other is it's watermarked. And there's, yes, outside, but yeah, I like that one. I really like that one. I like the sky. It's an interesting sky, and what we'll see is sky, so I think we'll have that one. So there we go. And I'm showing you this because, you know, it's where you can get them from. Now, I've got images that I've taken and made myself that I can use, but for you can just get it straight off the web, not a problem. So if you click on the world symbol and then on texture, and then you want a new texture, set the type away from clouds, which is the default, to image or movie, open, find whatever the hell it was called, contact sheet something, yeah, and there we are. Now if you click both, you'll see that on the right, which is the both side of it, it's all grey, so something wrong somewhere. What can that be? And the reason is that we want to adjust these settings down here. In fact, we want to turn off blend, which would blend what was rendered before, i.e. the grey, in with our image. We don't want that, and we're still wrong because we need to turn on the horizon. That's better. That tells Blender that we want the image to be visible on the horizon and not just when we look up, because you can set it so you've got a nice blue horizon or something and then sky above if sky is all you've got in your image, and that's what we'll do. Okay, So render that, and instantly it looks quite a lot better. It's not 100%, and there's a number of things we could do to fix that. One of the things we could do is to repeat that image, not obviously in the Y direction because you don't want the hills in the sky, and you can do that in the image mapping. You see where it says repeat, and whenever you repeat, if you're going to repeat it twice, it's a good idea to do mirror X. And I've turned up the Y, which we didn't want to do because I did that automatically, but never mind. And we'll re-render that, and I think that looks a bit better because the clouds are bigger, but it's probably not the optimum thing. What we really want to do is to change the image sampling and the mapping. And we're going to change the coordinates so it looks projected on the inside of a sphere, and Blender automatically knows to make it sort of like a theoretical sphere. And there you are, that's as if it was on a sphere, and you can see the hills, you can see the sky, depending on which way it's pointing. I still don't like that because there's too much hills. So this is what I said before, I know it's going to be better if it's projected on the inside of a tube. And there you are. So you've got the sky upwards, and you've got the hills on the horizon as it should be. And that's about where we want to be. So the next thing that we want to do is to add our explosion, and we're going to make our explosion somewhere around frame 70, which is about there. Now the explosion is a modifier, but we can't add it yet because we have to do something to the cube first. In fact, we have to do two things. So with the cube selected, we're going to go into edit mode, and we want to make it more complicated. And one of the ways of doing that, an easy way of doing that, there's more difficult ways as well, is to subdivide it from that menu on the left there. Subdivide it once and you get 4 faces on each side. Subdivide it again, you get 16, you get, well, loads. I think that is enough faces for anyone. And the reason we do that is because explode can only explode really between vertices. So to get some interesting shapes rather than just cubes, we want more detail in there. Now what we'll do is we'll solidify it, and that will give it a thickness, so that instead of some impossibly thin piece of paper, which is what it would explode into otherwise, we actually explode it into pieces. And that thickness made 0.12, we apply it, and then we'll go back to modifiers. We'll add modifier, and it's going to be the explosion modifier this time, which is in the simulation one. But I've just remembered we need particles first. Okay, so we go into particle system, which is like the sparkly thing in the menu at the top right there. And we're going to set first of all the number of particles we want. This will be the number of chunks it breaks into. Now if you break it down into 1,000, it's going to be something like dust. For something this size, we probably want to set that to about 55, 60, maybe 70, I don't know. I'm going to set it to 55. You set it to whatever the hell you like. You can come back and reset it later and play around with it so that you get an effect you really like. And we're starting 70 frames in, and our end, because we want it all to explode pretty quickly, we want 72. So it's going to drop into pieces inside 2 frames. 1, it always looks a bit bogus. 2's okay, 3's better. 5 or 6, it takes a long time and you can see what's going on and it might not be very convincing. But for some effects you want it to drop apart really quickly, and for some really slowly, so you can set the end to whatever you like within your animation time. The next thing is emitter geometry. This is how fast it will go, exploding out from all the faces. And we're going to go for something like 4.5 or something like that, I think, which is obviously blender units per second actually. And if we press play on the animation player down at the bottom, that's what we get. You can see, and now our exploded lumps of Q will follow exactly the same path as the particles. Okay, now you can see at the moment that they're dropping through the floor, which isn't very good, but we'll sort that one out later. And we tiddle around with it until we've got those right and we're happy with that. And if you'll render it now, you'll see that what you actually get is halos, because that's the default setting as to how it's rendered, and they're sort of gassy sort of looking glowing things. Now here's a little tip when you do an explosion. If we back it back to the start of the explosion, which is frame 70, and then we'll hover our mouse over the top of that bar and hit I, and that will insert a keyframe for that bar. So that bar will be frozen into displaying those as halos at that point. Then 4 or 5 frames later on, we'll go there again and we'll set it to none and hit I, and that sets a keyframe that turns the halos off. Now your exploded bits of Q will still show, but there won't be any halos. And that sort of will give you kind of a puff of smoke effect as it explodes, which is quite nice, and it's free. So, right, explode, that's what we want. Now there's several settings in explode, and the only one you really want to worry about is cut edges, and I'll show you why. Leave the rest to say R. Let's just go out of the render view. And you see there that it's cut into sort of square edges. Not very good. The shapes aren't very interesting. So if we click cut edges, the shapes instantly become a bit more interesting and a bit more realistic. It doesn't look quite like some kiddie's taking scissors to it. And there you are. That's explode, really. So now if we grab hold of the green line and move it backwards and forwards, we can see the cube exploding, and of course the bits still disappear through the floor. But yeah, and you can play around with the number of pieces to get smaller pieces or bigger pieces. It's entirely up to you, and that's altered in the particles. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make the floor, and so basically we'll select the floor, go to the physics, which is the little tennis ball on the right hand side of the menu, hit collision, and that opens, and there's several settings on there, and let's go through what they do. Now if you saw that bit of animation there, everything bounced all over the place. To stop them from bouncing quite so much, turn up the particle damping, and now they're bouncing still, but they're not bouncing so much. It's still a bit too much, so we want to turn that up a bit further. Do it again, and that's a bit better. If you were to turn it all the way up, they just hit the floor and stick there. No bounce at all. Now they're sliding at the moment because there's no friction, which is the next thing we need to adjust when we're happy with the way they bounce. And we've got kind of half a bounce there, which is about what you want for something dropping onto stone, I reckon. So we turn the friction up, and you see they hit the floor, but they don't slide so much. And you can play with these settings. You can get them to bounce more or less, and turn the friction up and down until you've got them behaving the way you want. And that's entirely up to you. You know, forget all the soft body stuff on the right. It's not applicable to this. It's just purely particle damping. And the permeability at the top does an obvious thing. It decides whether particles actually go through the floor or not, and we don't want them to, so we're leaving it at 0. Right, so this is what I reckon works for me. About 0.65 damping and about 0.35 or thereabouts friction. I'm quite happy with that. Quick test render so you can see the particles. There they are. all scattered around the floor, complete with shadows and everything. And that's it for this tutorial. See you in the next one.